Nehemiah, chapter 1. Nehemiah's prayer. Nehemiah was a cupbearer to the Persian king Artaxerxes during his reign. One day, he received news from Hanani, who had come from Jerusalem. The people of Judah were suffering greatly, and the walls of Jerusalem were in ruins. Upon hearing this news, Nehemiah was grieved and fasted, and prayed to God. He confessed the sins of the Israelites. He also remembered God's promise to Moses, and prayed for mercy. Nehemiah earnestly hoped that God would restore Israel through him. He prayed that he would find favor before the king. His fervent prayer moved God's heart. This led to the amazing event of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 2. Nehemiah goes to Jerusalem. Nehemiah was saddened by the news of Jerusalem's desolation. He then prayed to God for Jerusalem. King Artaxerxes asked Nehemiah, who was filled with anxiety, why he was so anxious. Nehemiah told him about the desolation of his hometown, Jerusalem, and asked for help rebuilding it. The king readily agreed, even providing the necessary documents and building materials. Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem under the escort of the Persian army. After 3 days of rest, Nehemiah inspected the walls of Jerusalem at night. Seeing the ruined walls and burned gates, he realized the need for rebuilding. He then presented his plan to the leaders of Judah and appealed for their participation. Some criticized and opposed the plan. However, Nehemiah, believing in God's help, displayed a firm resolve. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 3. Rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. High priest Eliashib and the priests began rebuilding the wall at the sheep gate, extending from the Tower of Hammeah to the Tower of Hananel. Various people, including Jericho, Meremoth, and Meshullam, participated in rebuilding their respective sections. They strengthened the walls by building gates, installing doors, and installing bars. In addition to the residents of Jerusalem, people from other regions also came to help. Each household and individual faithfully rebuilt their assigned section. The entire community of Judah united and accomplished this great work. The people of Tekoa participated, but the nobles did not cooperate. The rebuilding of the wall goes beyond the physical walls and symbolizes the spiritual restoration of the community. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 4. Defeating the obstacles to rebuilding the walls. Sanballat and Tobiah, enraged by the news of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, mocked the people of Judah. That wall would collapse if even one fox climbed it. And the surrounding tribes conspired together and attempted to attack. The people's morale gradually sank under the constant interference and ridicule of their enemies. But Nehemiah did not despair. Instead, he prayed and encouraged them firmly. Fight for your brothers, your children, your wives, and your homes, for God is with us. The people, sword and spear in one hand, and tools in the other, silently built the wall. With God's help and the people's dedication, the wall was already halfway complete. Despite the threats from their enemies, who tried to obstruct the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, they stood firm with faith and determination. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 5. The poor cry. The people were suffering from famine, taxes, and usury, and were forced to sell their children into slavery. When Nehemiah heard this news, he was furious, and rebuked the nobles and leaders. He pointed out the injustice of usury, and set an example by providing hospitality to the people with his own wealth. He demanded that the fields and vineyards be returned, and that interest be waived. He also declared that those who broke their oath would be punished by God. As governor for 12 years, Nehemiah received no allowance, and did not tax the people. He demonstrated the example of a leader who feared God and cared for the people. He addressed injustice within the community, and emphasized the importance of practicing love and caring for one another. Nehemiah's dedication demonstrates the importance of leaders who put the community's interests first. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 6. The plot against Nehemiah. Upon hearing news of the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem, enemies, including Sanballat and Tobiah, plotted to eliminate Nehemiah. They tried to lure Nehemiah to the plain of Ono, but Nehemiah firmly refused. "I am doing a great work, so I cannot go down to see you." The enemies then sent false letters to slander Nehemiah. They even bribed the prophet Shemaiah to threaten him, telling him to flee to the temple. But Nehemiah saw through their scheme and refused to give in. In the end, Nehemiah and the people completed the walls of Jerusalem in an astonishing 52 days. When the enemies heard this news, they were deeply discouraged and trembled in fear. However, even after the wall was completed, the nobles of Judah continued to collude with Tobiah and constantly attempted to undermine Nehemiah. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 7. Nehemiah appoints leaders. When the walls of Jerusalem were completed, Nehemiah appointed men to guard the city. First, he appointed his brother Hanani and Ananiah, the commander of the guard, to guard the gates. He then instructed everyone in the city to stand guard at their guard posts at night. He also instructed them to stand guard in front of their houses during the day. At that time, Jerusalem was large but sparsely populated. Nehemiah decided to increase the number of people living in Jerusalem by tracing the genealogy of the people. He discovered a list of those who had returned from Babylon. Nehemiah reorganized the people based on this record. This list detailed the names of those who had returned with Zerubbabel. Nehemiah sought to rebuild the Jerusalem community around these people. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 8. Celebrating the Feast of Tabernacles. The Israelites, having returned from Babylonian captivity, requested that Ezra read the law. The Israelites listened attentively to the words of Ezra the scribe. The people understood the meaning of the law, repented of their sins, and wept. Nehemiah comforted the people and commanded them to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. The people wove branches together to build huts for the Feast of Tabernacles. They listened to Ezra's reading of the law each day and celebrated the feast with joy for 7 days. This was the most magnificent and joyful Feast of Tabernacles since the time of Joshua. The square in front of the water gate, where the people gathered, symbolized purification and revival. It was even more meaningful that they heard the word there and restored their faith. Ezra emphasized to the Israelites that they should always remember their life in the wilderness and God's grace. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 9. The people confess their sins. The Israelites observed the Feast of Tabernacles in the 7th month. On the 24th day of the 7th month, the Israelites fasted, wore sackcloth, and covered themselves with dust. They cut ties with all foreigners and repented. The Israelites gathered and spent a quarter of the day reading from the book of the law. And another quarter of the day, they confessed their sins and worshiped God. The Levites cried out loudly and praised God. They praised God's grace in choosing them, beginning with the creation of heaven and earth. They were thankful that God had not abandoned them, despite their ancestors' rebellion and idolatry. The Israelites voluntarily repented. They cut off all relationships that were corrupting them, and returned to God. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 10. Those who sealed the covenant. Governor Nehemiah and other leaders signed the covenant document. The people swore to strictly adhere to specific provisions, including prohibiting intermarriage with Gentiles, observing the Sabbath and holy days. This covenant was not simply a formal promise. It was the Israelites' resolution to repent of their past sins and restore their relationship with God. It also demonstrated their firm resolve to rebuild their shattered community and center their lives on God. The covenant document detailed the names of Governor Nehemiah, the priests, Levites, and the leaders of the people. This demonstrates the importance of this covenant and the widespread participation it required. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 11. The people living in Jerusalem. During Nehemiah's time, the ruined walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt. However, due to the small population, the city was vulnerable to attack. Nehemiah decided to increase the population of Jerusalem. First, the leaders took the initiative and began to settle in Jerusalem. Then, by lottery, 1/10 of the people were selected to move to Jerusalem. He also blessed and encouraged those who volunteered to live there. Various people, including the descendants of Judah, Benjamin, priests, and Levites, dedicated themselves to rebuilding Jerusalem. Thanks to their dedication, Jerusalem was revitalized. Other descendants of Judah lived scattered in various towns, including Kiriath Arba and Beersheba. The descendants of Benjamin resided in Geba, Bethel, and other places. The Levites worked within the territory of the tribe of Judah and were responsible for the temple work. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 12. The priests and Levites. The list of priests and Levites who returned with Zerubbabel and Jeshua holds significant significance in confirming the identity of the covenant people. Even amidst the despair of the Babylonian captivity, they carried out the ministry of the covenant. At the dedication of the walls of Jerusalem, the Levites enriched the ceremony with thanksgiving songs and musical instruments. 2 choirs marched on either side of the walls and offered a great sacrifice in the temple. The people rejoiced and rejoiced, and their joy reverberated far and wide throughout Jerusalem. Nehemiah stored offerings and first fruits in the temple, treasury for the temple workers. He also distributed them to the Levites, as needed to support their livelihood. Thanks to the dedication and hard work of the priests and Levites, temple worship continued. It also played a crucial role in restoring the faith and establishing the identity of the Israeli community. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day. Nehemiah, chapter 13. Nehemiah's reforms. Returning from Persia, Nehemiah witnessed the serious corruption of the people and instituted reforms. First, he separated all foreigners and mixed groups from Israel. He distanced himself from the Ammonites and Moabites, who had previously harassed Israel. In the room provided by the priest Eliashib, Tobiah's belongings were driven out of the temple. He then purified the temple. He collected tithes to re-establish the Levites, who had suffered from the people's failure to properly pay tithes. Thus, he restored the Levites to their duties in the temple. He prohibited business on the Sabbath. He disciplined those who had married Ashdodite, Ammonite, or Moabite women. Nehemiah's reforms focused on obeying God's word and preserving the holiness of the community. He led the Israelites to turn away from idols and live in fear of God. Provided by the Bible History School. If you subscribe and set up notifications, you can receive one chapter of the Bible every day.